Now it is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, although Ali Velshi is in for Lawrence tonight. Good evening, Ali.
Rachel, good evening. I think it's fair to say everybody in my family watches you more than they watch me, so I was quite vindicated to see your belly laugh when watching those commercials from Republican members of Congress and other candidates who say that they are the party who is going to protect pre-existing conditions after voting against it 70 times, after running 2 elections to get rid of Obamacare, which is fundamentally, other than the Medicaid expansion, about being able to insure people who had pre-existing conditions.
The most amazing thing to me is seeing, tonight, I think the belly laugh to which you are referring was Martha McSally, who has voted dozens of times to kill Obamacare, who has been profane in her enthusiasm for wanting to kill Obamacare, literally getting up at her debate for Arizona Senate seat and saying, we cannot go back to the time before Obamacare in this country.
Because it's impossible. Because if you didn't have insurance from a company like ours and you couldn't afford COBRA and you had a pre-existing condition, that was it. America is the only developed economy in which people declare bankruptcy because of health care. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. So thank you for underscoring it, Rachel.
And I love your family and I pay them all to watch me.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, the past 36 hours has been a test of leadership for the President of the United States. The nation is in a moment of crisis. Presidents typically try to unite the country at times like this. Look at President Clinton after the Oklahoma City bombing, President Bush after 9/11, President Obama in the wake of the Sandy Hook massacre. But as the New York Times put it, President Trump, quote, chose confrontation rather than conciliation. Rather than trying to pull together an angry, anxious country during a wave of apparent pipe bombs sent to some of the president's most prominent critics, Mr. Trump lashed out, blaming perceived enemies for the toxic political environment that opponents say he himself has encouraged. President Trump seems unable or unwilling to understand what it means to lead us through these times. Following a brief call for national unity yesterday, the president was back attacking the media this morning, playing that blame game. In a tweet, he claimed that the press was generating, quote, a very big part of the anger we see today in our society. That's been the president's response to a potential serial mail bomber. Former CIA Director John Brennan, one of the targets of the attempted bombing, the one that went to CNN, quickly responded, "Stop blaming others. Look in the mirror. Your inflammatory rhetoric, insults, lies, and encouragement of physical violence are disgraceful. Clean up your act. Try to act presidential. The American people deserve much better. By the way, your critics will not be intimidated into silence." This morning, the White House press secretary was asked by NBC's Peter Alexander about reports that the president has not reached out to any of the targets of those pipe bombs. She didn't answer.
Has the president reached out to the Obamas or the Clintons or any of the others who received these packages to express anything? Sarah, yes or no? All we need is a yes or no, just for clarity.
Will the president be contacting anyone who's received these, Sarah?
It's just not a hard question. It's a yes or no question. There were a lot of pipe bombs. The count now stands at 10. That's how many pipe bombs have been sent to 8 different targets, all Democratic officials or critics of the president. This morning, we woke up to the news that actor Robert De Niro, a frequent and vocal critic of the president, had received a package with a bomb. 2 packages with similar pipe bombs were addressed to former Vice President Joe Biden. They were intercepted in Delaware. Law enforcement officials on both coasts are working to track down the person or persons responsible. The FBI and the NYPD held a joint press conference in New York warning that more devices could be out there.
We continue to advise the American public to remain vigilant, as it does remain possible further packages have been or could be mailed. These devices should be considered dangerous.
As for the devices themselves, some were apparently poorly made. Investigators are trying to determine whether or not this means that they were a hoax or the work of an unsophisticated bomb maker. Here's New York Police Commissioner James O'Neill.
We are treating them as live devices. As you see the way our bomb squad detectives went into CNN yesterday, this has to be taken with the utmost seriousness. So as far as a hoax device, we're not treating it that way.
Two senior law enforcement officials tell NBC News that authorities are looking into whether some of the packages were mailed from Florida. The New York Times reports, though investigators initially believed that some of the packages were delivered by hand or by courier, they have now concluded that all 10 were likely sent through the mail, a person briefed on the matter says. There's some speculation because they didn't have a stamp, a franking on them, but it's because of the way the packages were put together. The Verge reports tonight the packages have already left behind clues that investigators can now examine. Trace evidence could include lingering DNA or fibers that are found on the packages. Tonight, at an event in Buffalo, New York, Joe Biden spoke publicly for the first time about the events of this week.
Folks, we don't have all the facts yet. And we don't know who's behind this or why they're doing it. But as my mother used to say, that out of something bad, Joey, something good will come if you look hard enough for it. And my hope is this recent spat of these, who knows exactly what they were, but these pipe bombs being mailed, might wake everybody in my business up a little bit and realize that we have to begin to put this country back together again. This division, this hatred, this ugliness, it has to end. Words matter.
Yeah, words matter. Joining us now, Joyce Vance, a former federal prosecutor who was the bomb prosecutor in her Alabama jurisdiction for many years. She's a professor at the University of Alabama Law School. Also joining us, Matt Miller, former spokesman for Attorney General Eric Holder, who was one of the targets of the mail bombs, and Michelle Goldberg, New York Times columnist. All three are MSNBC contributors. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being with us. Joyce Vance, let's start with you and the bombs. The bomb experts tell me that the one good thing about bombs, particularly bombs sent through the mail, is there's lots of evidence. There's lots of stuff to look through. There's lots of ways to figure out who is behind this.
That's absolutely right. Investigators can start by looking for fibers, for fingerprints, and for DNA. Those are some healthy clues. They can also analyze the components in the bomb, figure out where they were purchased, and trace back that way. So lots of leads to follow in the next 48 to 72 hours.
Matt Miller, Jim Kavanaugh, formerly of the ATF, who helps us through some of these things and was on with you last night, said to me today the bomb maker apparently was not the valedictorian of the bomb-making class. It seems to be a flawed setup. Some of them, we're not sure all of them, but some of them were not going to go off, although they truly are bombs. And to people who receive them or get these threats, the effect is very similar. The idea is that this is meant to strike terror into the hearts of people. What's the effect that it's had so far?
I think you're right. That's the intent, is to strike terror. You saw John Brennan, though, today say that he's not going to be intimidated. When I talked to my former boss, Eric Holder, yesterday, he said, if anyone was trying to intimidate me, they don't know me very well. And I think that'll be the effect on all the people who receive these packages, or who were intended to receive these packages. But there's another question about what's the effect on the country writ large. And I think what we see so far is not that this is an episode that is bringing the country together like you would hope. Mm-hmm. As Joe Biden said, you see it again driving the country apart. You don't have to look very far. You look at the president's remarks this morning, blaming it on the media. And if you look in kind of conservative circles, you see people sort of making excuses. You see people coming up with conspiracy theories that this was somehow, a liberal plot to distract from the caravan, which they think the election ought to be all about. So again, you have this idea that because apparently they were, Democratic targets, it's not a national crisis, but something that we can kind of again fight over, which is obviously just a really kind of reprehensible idea.
Michelle Goldberg, I was mocked yesterday, fairly so, because during the coverage of this, I had said that the president was going to speak last night in Wisconsin, and maybe it was going to be that turning point for him. Maybe it was going to be
There's no turning point.
Like Clinton after Oklahoma City, or George Bush at 9/11, or President Obama after Sandy Hook, although those were not turning points for those presidents. But maybe the president would realize that this is the moment for that healing. You write tonight in the New York Times, Trump describes journalists as the enemy of the people. When someone sent bombs to leading figures in the Democratic opposition, he blamed the media for covering him too aggressively. We don't know who's behind these bombs, but we do know that Trump can't even fake concern for their intended targets. We couldn't get a response as to whether he's called anybody who was one of those targets, and his real concern seemed to have lasted about 3 hours yesterday.
Right. And what's fascinating is that if he could just, fake it for a few hours, he would probably get enormous credit for, like you said, having turned a corner, for being a statesman. But he can't do it. This is who he is. And I think that besides kind of being revealing about the total absence of leadership in this country, it sends a message to the kind of people who might do something like this, right? Assuming that this is a person who is on the right and not some sort of, troll. Assuming this is a person on the right, they are targeting people that Trump hates, that Trump constantly attacks. And presumably, this person believes that they have Trump's kind of tacit approval in doing this, right? I mean, presumably, they believe that they're on his side. And the message that he sends by, refusing to take responsibility, refusing to treat this as a crisis, refusing to show any sorts of presidential leadership, it's sort of a wink and a nod to anyone who actually would follow through on the demonization of his enemies.
Or, Joyce, like the Pizzagate incident, the guy who went to shoot the pizza parlor up where he was supposedly there was a pedophilia ring being run by Hillary Clinton and her associates. He really thought he was doing something good. He thought he was going to save children who are in a pedophilia ring. So once you sow this kind of disarray and confusion, there are lots of people in America. We've got a big percentage of conspiracy theorists in this country, perhaps more than in most democracies, who may act on this.
I think that that's right, and our leaders need to be extraordinarily careful in the difficult and divisive times that we live in, that they don't use language in a careless way that can incite people who are either, might have a mental health issue or simply on the political fringes, inspire those people to use violence to resolve political differences. Our leaders need to make a strong stand at this point. The president needs to take the stage and tell the American people that we don't use violence in this country to resolve political differences. The leadership in the Republican Party needs to stand up behind that. People need to hear that message. They have not heard that message. In fact, if anything, what they've heard today is a president who continues to divide when he speaks to us.
Matt, we don't know if this episode's over. We truly hope it is. It's remarkable that we're not talking about people injured, maimed, or killed by mail bombs. But we can't be numb to the idea that there is a campaign out there of fear, that there's somebody who, whatever level of expertise they have, launched some sort of a coordinated attack on a number of people who the president has deemed to be his critics or enemies. Where does this lead? Where does this go? I'm so glad we're not talking about tragedy, but I am worried that because there was no tragedy, lots of people are just going to dismiss this as nothing to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that one of the things that's so striking, it's not just the president's remarks, which I think were ill-suited for the moment, but it's this very tepid response from the administration writ large. I mean, the senior-most person that we're hearing from regularly from the federal government is the assistant director in charge of the New York field office for the FBI. Mm-hmm. We're not hearing from the Attorney General. We're not hearing from the Secretary of Homeland Security. We're not hearing regularly from anyone at the White House. In fairness,
we've heard from all of those people about the southern border and the caravan and the fact that there's military going to the caravan. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristen Nielsen's only clarification she issued tonight is we're not aiming to kill anybody. We're not aiming to kill anybody at the southern border, but they're talking about sealing the border.
That's exactly right. At a time you've had a mass assassination attempt against two former presidents, a former Secretary of State, a former Attorney General, and a former Vice President, and the bomber is still on the loose. I mean, just as a thought experiment, imagine if these bombs weren't sent to Democrats, but were sent to, say, business leaders, and Al-Qaeda or ISIS took responsibility from it. We would see, and the bomber was still on the loose, we would see every senior member of the national security team out to cameras, doing interviews, talking about this crisis and how we needed to catch this bomber before they can strike again. We are seeing none of that from the administration. And I think we know why we don't see it from the president. I think you don't see it from others in the administration because they're worried about offending the president. They're worried that talking about the underlying issue somehow hurts the Republican Party's prospects. And that is not their job to worry about partisan politics. Their job is to keep the country safe and to reassure the American public that they're doing everything they can to bring this person to justice.
But what is interesting about our partisan divide, as we go back to the Kavanaugh nomination to the Supreme Court, Michelle, is that once the president had drawn the lines, he was actually more successful than some people would anticipate in rallying people around the cause. So it became a You know, if you don't support Kavanaugh, then your sons are in danger of being falsely accused. At this point, the president has sort of dismissed this. The leadership of the U.S. government has largely dismissed this as a non-event. In conservative media circles, there are all these false flag stories about how this is probably a left-winger who is doing this to somehow bring scorn on Republicans with 12 days to go before the election. We're not really, we're now seeing a partisan divide about how you feel about a potential serial mail bomber.
Right, which shouldn't surprise us. I mean, this president sees the majority of Americans who voted against him and who have opposed him at every stage of his presidency to be his enemies, right? He has never even tried. He's never even pretended to be a president for all Americans. He's a president for his small, angry, conspiratorial, motivated base. And his political prospects depend on keeping them in a state of extreme fear and rage so that they can turn out and hopefully maintain power, you know, hopefully for him, maintain power in the midterms because of their various demographic advantages. But you know, he is unlike any other president in modern history in the constant contempt that he shows for the majority of the people he is supposed to be representing. And I also think one of the interesting things about this moment is that it showed the extreme disingenuousness, not just of his rhetoric, but of all of the right's rhetoric since the Kavanaugh hearings and even before that about quote unquote civility, you know, that we have a crisis of civility in this country. And, you know, what they're trying to do, I think, is to equate the fact that a lot of Americans are angry and are confronting their politicians in public and are being even rude to their politicians in public. They're trying to equate that with violent attacks because there is far more violence on the right than on the left.
One is an exercise of your First Amendment obligations. The other one is extremism and violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but they've adopted a sort of rhetoric that equates those two things when what we've really seen, you know, both in the Trump campaign with its constant incitement to violence, you know, a kind of incitement that goes all the way through last week when he was praising Greg Gianforte, the Montana congressman who body slammed a reporter. You know, Trump, no president has welcomed violence on the part of his supporters the way Trump has. And just as, you know, all of his other vices have filtered down through the Republican Party, so has this infatuation with violence. You see it in the Republican embrace of this far-right street gang called the Proud Boys. I mean, it's an astonishing thing what we're witnessing happening to this country before our eyes.
It is an astonishing thing. This is an astonishing conversation that we're actually having it, but we're having it. Joyce Vance, thank you for joining us. Michelle Goldberg and Matt Miller. Coming up, new fallout from yesterday's New York Times report that the Chinese and Russians are spying on Donald Trump via his personal unsecure cell phone. Malcolm Nance joins me next. Plus, more details about Robert Mueller's investigation, which is reportedly honing in on what Roger Stone knew about hacking and the release of Hillary Clinton's emails. And if he knew, who did he tell? That's coming up.
We can't have someone in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential or classified.
So it seems that President Trump may be the one who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential or classified. The New York Times reports that officials have warned President Trump about using an unsecure cell phone because Russian and Chinese spies are listening in on these calls in an attempt to exploit the administration. President Trump denied this, reporting today by tweeting, "I rarely use a cell phone, and when I do, it's government authorized. I like hard lines, just more made-up fake news." Tweeted again about that. Ironically, Trump used an iPhone to send this very tweet. See that at the bottom? Twitter for iPhone? And thousands of others while he is the president of the United States. Omarosa, a former Trump staffer, doesn't even believe the president's claims, tweeting, "He always used his personal iPhone in the White House for calls, even after being told over and over again about the security risk. He disliked his secure government-issued cell. He said it was slow and buggy." Taking a page from the Trump playbook, a spokeswoman for the Chinese government called the reporting fake news and suggested President Trump exchange his iPhone for a cell phone made by a Chinese manufacturer. Joining us now is Malcolm Nance, an MSNBC counterterrorism and intelligence analyst. I mean, I've got a smile on my face while talking about this, Malcolm, but it's actually pretty serious because the Chinese and Russians and others are really good at intercepts, as you know. This is a specialty of yours. They can intercept using cell towers, using the phone itself, using the device. The National Security Council has given the president a phone that apparently is fixed for this sort of stuff, and the president doesn't like that.
Well, you're absolutely right. This device that everybody carries is an intelligence aggregator and communications device, not just for you and your family, but for foreign intelligence agencies, should they deem that you are targetable. The top target in the United States is the mindset, thought processes, and decisions of the President of the United States. No matter who he is, no matter who is sitting in that chair, the President of the United States will reveal information which is confidential just in his general discussions. Right. So if you can get an unsecured telephone, like an iPhone, you know, every iPhone, each one of these, they're not shielded. They emanate and radiate information. They're almost location tracking devices. If you can get close enough or get within the networks to where you set up false cell phone towers, then you can collect that data. And believe me, the Russian embassy and Washington, D.C. and the Chinese embassy and their substations that are, you know, clandestinely placed throughout the city in the United States, they can get this unsecure information. The president should not be using that iPhone at all.
Now, this story broke more than 24 hours ago, and the White House has just responded a short time ago. It's taken them an unusually long time to respond to this. The president tweeted a couple of times, but I want you to go through this White House response. It's very carefully worded. The allegation in the New York Times is that there are 3 phones, that there are 2 government phones that are secure, and then there's the one that President Trump likes to use, which is his personal iPhone. Here's what the White House says. The article written by the New York Times presented inaccurate information about the president's cell phone and its usage. The president does not have 3 cellular phones. He has 1 official government iPhone. It's a crafty response to the response. He's got 1 official government iPhone. So the New York Times said he had 2. We're not sure what that's about. But it didn't say, he said he doesn't have 3. He has this 1 official phone. So it hasn't addressed the personal phone, which all sorts of people have reported the president uses.
It doesn't matter. What it hasn't really addressed is whether this phone is shielded, whether this phone is secure and the communications which come from it are encrypted from end to end, or whether it's just an iPhone the U.S. government purchased using the GSA purchasing process. Right. Because that's what I got out of it.
Right. I was going to say, as a government employee, as a military guy, if you get a phone from the government, it's generally speaking going to be a normal phone. In your case, you're an intelligence guy, so maybe yours is a little bit different. But generally speaking, the government purchases an iPhone, gets a discount on them.
You're absolutely right. And if the president is using a hard line, then those red phones, those secure phones, those hard lines are what he's going to use. But we know he uses an unsecure mobile phone. Journalists just today, all throughout the day, have been saying they have seen this phone sit on his desk. They have watched him tweet. Right. It is not secure.
So there's another story here.
Communications. Yeah.
Let me just tell you this. The Maggie Haberman from the New York Times has tweeted, multiple West Wing aides say Jordan Karam, who's taken over as lead of Oval Office Ops, tells colleagues about screening the call logs on the non-cell phone for Kelly, the non-cell phone being the hardline call. Trump uses cell to try to avoid the Kelly screenings. Now, there's something wrong with this, Malcolm. I totally get it. The guy doesn't like control. It's very clear that his White House chief of staff is the weakest chief of staff that a president has had in a very long time, by design. The president doesn't want Kelly snooping on or telling him who to call. Great. That's for those 2 men to sort out. The problem is, by not doing it, the Russians and Chinese are possibly developing information that can be used to compromise the president or others in his circle.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Listen, if you listen carefully, that scream you're hearing is all the watchstanders at the National Security Agency's National SIGINT Operations Center pulling their hair out over the fact that a non-secure cell phone, which is now a transmitter to our foreign intelligence adversaries, is is broadcasting the president's most secret desires, the ones that he does not want his chief of staff to hear. Whether that's private conversations to his friends, an unknown mistress, whether he's revealing information of a clandestine or of a classified nature. The only subscribers to that right now are Donald Trump, his friends, and all the third-party collectors that have the technical capability of targeting him because he is the world's top signals intelligence target.
Yeah, you are right. It's the stuff. They're listening in on the stuff that he doesn't want to tell John Kelly. That's the problem. All right, Malcolm, great to see you as always. Thank you. Malcolm Nance. Coming up, Robert Mueller's team hones in on the collusion question up next. Okay, I need you to pay attention for this one. Put your phone down for a second. You need to actually look and pay attention. This one's a complicated story. NBC News has exclusive new reporting on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of possible links between Trump associate Roger Stone and the release of Democratic emails stolen by Russia. A source familiar with the investigation tells NBC that Mueller's office has obtained communications suggesting that Roger Stone associate Jerome Corsi, a right-wing conspiracy theorist, might have had advanced knowledge that the emails of Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman had been stolen and handed to WikiLeaks. Okay. Mueller's trying to find out if Corsi may have passed information about those stolen emails to Roger Stone. Corsi's the guy on the left. Roger Stone's the guy on the right. Stone claims he only got his information from the public domain. But NBC reports Mueller's investigators have reviewed messages to members of the Trump team in which Stone and Corsi seem to take credit for the release of Democratic emails. Now, according to another report, Mueller is interested in Roger Stone's attempt to obtain a presidential pardon for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, this guy. Mother Jones reports that on January 6th of this year, Stone texted an associate, quote, "I am working with others to get J.A., Julian Assange probably, a blanket pardon. It's very real and very possible. Don't F it up." Stone then texted, "Something very big about to go down." Mueller's team has reportedly questioned at least one Stone associate about that effort. Stone is not denying the report, by the way. He told Mother Jones, quote, "I most definitely advocated for a pardon for Assange." This one's complicated, but it might be getting us somewhere very close. Back with me now, Joyce Vance and Matt Miller. Just to be clear, everybody knows Roger Stone is a close associate of Donald Trump's. Joyce, this is your domain. This is heavy stuff. It's complicated. It's got a lot of connections. What do you make of this news?
So one thing that we know for sure is that there are a lot of connections between Roger Stone and various Russians involved in the release of Democratic emails that had been hacked. And on the other hand, we know that Stone had close connections to Trump. He worked for the campaign. There's a little uncertainty about whether he was fired or left voluntarily, but he at least theoretically had access. Given all of that information, Mueller will run down all of those leads and see whether or not there really was communication between Stone and the Russians, and if so, whether that communication then went back and forth with the campaign. That's what this whole ballgame is about.
So, Matt, Roger Stone didn't deny the Julian Assange working on a pardon for him, which is interesting because Roger Stone denies ever having talked to Julian Assange. If I'm ever going to help anybody get a pardon, I'd like to have dinner with them first or something like that. But Roger Stone has changed his story, to Joyce's point, many times about Russia. Here's what he told the Washington Post in April of 2017 about Russia and the Trump campaign. And he later admitted this wasn't true, but here's what he said.
I didn't talk to anybody who was identifiably Russian during the 2-year run-up to this campaign. I'm not sure I did previously either. I very definitely can't think of anybody who might have been a Russian without my knowledge.
All right, he did subsequently said that wasn't true, but it is hard for thinking people to follow the story of Roger Stone and this Corsi fellow and this shady cast of characters.
Yeah, that's right. And especially with Roger Stone, I mean, it's oftentimes, trying to interpret his statements is like walking through a hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
Most people in politics who involve themselves in dirty tricks or kind of unethical behavior don't take credit for it. They don't brag about it. Roger Stone is the rare person who, when he's involved in a dirty trick, will brag about it. But not only that, will oftentimes take credit and brag about dirty tricks that he had nothing to do with. So when you look at these situations, you have to ask yourself, was he lying back when he took credit for these things? Was he lying when he was talking about, when he potentially was sending emails to the campaign saying he had advanced knowledge of the Podesta emails, or is he lying now when he says he really didn't? It's a very difficult thing to sort through. The thing that interests me most about today's development is that this idea of a pardon for Julian Assange. One of the things, if you're a potential conspirator to a crime like Roger Stone, may be, the thing you worry most about is other people in that conspiracy eventually talking and giving you up. And one way to remove the threat of Julian Assange ever talking is to remove his legal jeopardy, and a pardon would obviously do that. The other thing I find fascinating, though, is, Roger Stone, we've talked about how you can't always, it's very hard to read his denials when he changes the story all the time. The White House was contacted for that Mother Jones story and didn't have a thing to say. It would be very easy for the White House to say it was never discussed here, it was never considered, they never brought it to us, or if they did bring it to us, we never took it seriously. They had no comment at all.
That's
I find
interesting.
That very peculiar.
And to Joyce Vance, who was a former U.S. attorney, after Roger Stone made that comment about I never spoke to a Russian, never met a Russian, don't know anybody who met a Russian, here's what he said afterward to the Washington Post. He said that was false. In fact, as he acknowledged this year, he met with a Russian in May of 2016 who offered to sell incriminating information to the Trump campaign. In the wake of that acknowledgement, he was forced to amend his testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. So, Joyce, let's make sense of this. He's talked to the House Intelligence Committee. Mueller knows about this. To Matt's point, it is like walking through a hall of mirrors with Roger Stone because he changes his story endlessly and puts a lot of it in public domain. How does Mueller make sense of Roger Stone, this Corsi fellow, whomever else, because they are shady characters. Corsi is the guy who gave birth to the birther conspiracy, the idea that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. He's holding a book here talking about a birth certificate. Where's the birth certificate? How does Mueller deal with these characters?
So fortunately, Mueller won't have to rely on Stone to get an authoritative version of what Stone did. He has a lot of other witnesses available to him. It may be that General Flynn has some light to shed on his activities. It may well be that Manafort or perhaps Gates had some engagement. There will be a number of different filters through which Mueller can test the veracity of statements that Stone has made. I think it's most interesting that he has not been in front of the grand jury himself. That would appear to be how you would treat a target of an investigation. And Stone really looks like he's the place that Mueller is coming to next.
He sure talks a lot for a guy who might be a target of investigation. Joyce, thanks. Always great to see you. Thank you. Matt Miller as well. Thanks to you. Coming up, country folk star Jason Isbell made headlines when he said Jesus would not have voted for Donald Trump. He's working to turn out the vote for the Democrat in the Tennessee Senate race, as are pop superstars, really, Taylor Swift and Sheryl Crow. But is this having an impact? Let's talk about that next. If you live in America, you may be familiar with the Christian acronym WWJD. It stands for What Would Jesus Do? It's an often used, it's a call for members of the Christian faith to make morally righteous decisions. Now, Americana folk music sensation Jason Isbell has spent the last few months trying to answer that question in the age of President Donald Trump. In an interview with The Guardian last month, Isbell told reporters Jesus would not have voted for Donald Trump, no matter what his pay was going to do as a result of that. Isbell is a four-time Grammy winner whose music was recently featured in the hit film A Star is Born. He's also a fixture of Nashville's country and folk music scene, fans of which tend to lean more conservative. Now, Isbell's drawn the ire of conservative websites like Breitbart and The Federalist for his cultural apostasy, but Isbell is not the type of person to back down from his political convictions under pressure. His music is known for tackling complex social justice issues, including white privilege. And last year, the Alabama native was an outspoken supporter for the campaign of Democratic Senator Doug Jones in his election against the accused child molester Roy Moore. In an interview with The Daily Show's Trevor Noah last year, Isbell took a stab at explaining America's cultural divide.
It's not Alabama that hates you, really. It's the people that live there. Sometimes I get a lot of anger directed toward me from my home state, and I think, well, it's not the mountains and rivers' fault. Alabama's a beautiful place. It's just there are Alabamans there.
All right, now the folk music singer has joined the ranks of pop star Taylor Swift by endorsing the Democratic Senate candidate in his adopted home state of Tennessee. When we come back, NBC's Cal Perry has an exclusive interview with Jason Isbell where he explains why he's supporting Democrat Phil Bredesen in Tennessee's Senate election and why he thinks Bredeson's opponent, Republican Marsha Blackburn, could actually be worse for America than Roy Moore. That's next. With just 12 days left until the midterms, the race for U.S. Senate in Tennessee remains surprisingly close. Until recently, polling in that race appeared to have been swinging away from Democratic candidate Phil Bredesen and in the direction of Republican Marsha Blackburn. But the latest poll out of Tennessee shows the two candidates in a virtual tie, with Bredesen leading by 1 point. Now, they may have something to do with the celebrity endorsements Bredesen has received from Nashville-based musicians like pop superstar Taylor Swift and folk singer Jason Isbell. NBC's Cal Perry just sat down for an extended interview with one of those stars, and he joins me live now from Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Cal.
Hey, Ali, this country, as you well know, has such a rich history of social commentary and activism in its music, especially when we're so politically divided. So here in Nashville is true with Jason Isbell. We had a chance, as you said, to sit down with him, talk to him about why politics are important to him, but also why this race in Tennessee is so important. You are a writer at a time in which there's not a lot of songwriting going on, at least in the mainstream.
Yeah.
Did the politics, or I should say the social commentary, lend itself to the music, or did the music lend itself to the social commentary? How did that shake out?
I think it's all one thing for me, because the music that I grew up listening to, the people who influence the work that I do, were never afraid to talk about those kinds of things. You know, Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and Joni Mitchell and Randy Newman and Leonard Cohen. You knew them in a lot of ways when you listened to their music. You know, warts and all sometimes. They would talk about the parts of themselves that they were afraid of and the parts that they were ashamed of and about the things that they believe. And I think a lot of the change that we're seeing right now is happening because people's belief system has been sort of swallowed up by this umbrella of politics, you know, because it's necessary to be involved now in a way that it's not been necessary before. We've all been lucky enough to sit back and go, they've got this. We're fine, you know, the taxes will get paid, roads will get built, people will get, you know, freedoms and justice and all this, and all of a sudden the internet smacks you in the face with, oh, look what's happening to this person, and look what's happening to that person, and look who's in charge of this, and look where your money is going today. So everybody is forced to be involved politically. So, you know, the songwriters who have been kind of speaking their mind the whole time, I think they kind of fit into the fold a little bit better.
Are people surprised when they find out you know what these things are, that you are so politically kind of in tune?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they're surprised by that or not. I'll tell you one thing, the accent really throws people off, because I know I did an interview with Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, and a lot of people saw that and they heard my voice and then heard what I was saying, and it was kind of like, you know how if you cut half of a cat's whiskers off, the cat gets really off balance and starts walking into the wall? It was similar to that, like hearing a person with an Alabama accent saying the things that I'm saying, not educated thing, but having the stance that I have, I think, and then sort of being able to back it up, you know, is confusing to people.
How much has religion influenced you? You said this thing, I don't know how long it was, the other day, Jesus wouldn't have voted for Trump.
I grew up in the church. My grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher, and, you know, I read the Bible many times, took a lot of notes, and, you know, now I'm not necessarily a religious person. I'm probably a spiritual person, but I don't really go by any specific set of rules but my own. But to me, that sounded like something you would hear from a fire and brimstone preacher in the South who actually cared about his congregation and not about his job or his bottom line. It sounded like, you know, I could very much hear my grandfather saying, you know, Jesus would not have been in favor of this kind of behavior. And I mean, I'm not speaking for Jesus, I'm just going by the red letters. You know, that's it. I'm going by what the book says, and it doesn't really condone the kind of things that Trump and his folks have done.
Before I let you go, let me get you on Bredesen and the race here in Tennessee. What do people need to know about this race? What's important about this race in Tennessee?
It's important. You know, when we were working in Alabama with Doug Jones a few months ago, we were terrified because there was a lot at stake, and Roy Moore, I just think that it shouldn't have gotten to the point where it was close, and I think the fact that people were able to mobilize and get out and vote and make sure that Roy Moore didn't wind up in that position, I think that was a good idea, and I think it really said something about Alabama that made me proud. But I'll tell you this, as bad as Roy Moore would have been, I think Marsha Blackburn may be more dangerous as far as a politician, because she's not as crazy as Roy Moore, and she can actually convince people to listen to her. But I don't think she's working for the right reasons, and I don't think she wants to help people as much as she wants to help herself. And I think Phil doesn't need the money. He had retired from politics. He doesn't really need to be reminded that he's a powerful person. I think he really re-entered this stage or this platform in the state of Tennessee because he thought he could help.
Why is it important people get out and vote, specifically in Tennessee?
Well, in Tennessee, I know it's very easy for people to think their vote is not going to matter, especially people who might be on the left end of the spectrum. They think, it's Tennessee. It's going to go a certain way no matter what I do. But we proved otherwise in Alabama a few months ago, and I think the more people that turn out, the more voices are represented, and the more politicians get elected who actually care about those voices. I think it's pretty obvious that the people you disagree with are showing up to vote. And that's really happening in the state of Tennessee. They're going to show up. So if you want to cancel them out, do it. Personally, I'm going to vote to cancel out John Rich from the band Big and Rich. His vote is not going to matter because I'm going to go and I'm going to vote the opposite.
So it's two birds with one stone for you.
Yeah,
on that front.
I get to cancel out John Rich, and I get one of the stickers. I get to put myself on Instagram and say I voted.
Listen, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Have a great show.
Appreciate the talk. Thanks a lot.
Everybody should put themselves on Instagram once they've voted. But let me ask you this, Cal. Tennessee, like a lot of other places, we are seeing record, or at least unexpectedly high turnout in early voting so far. What's the situation where you are?
Yeah, the same that we're seeing across the country. And look, what we do know about these endorsements and what we do know about artists getting involved in these races, and you heard there a joke about John Rich, a well-known artist across the country, but from here in Nashville, you get enthusiasm amongst the electorate. That is, of course, a good thing. We know that enthusiasm is up across the country, but certainly in this race, when you talk about these names and the line that Jason Isbell is able to walk in his music, where White Man's World, as you said, a song about white privilege, maybe a point that is uncomfortable for his audience, but in the same set we saw last night him do a song called Dress Blues, a song written at the height of the Iraq War, written for veterans. It brought down the house, Ali, and so it's that fine line that he's able to walk only in a place like Nashville.
Does he get hostility for it, or he sort of seemed to think that people look at him a little weird for it, but he doesn't seem to face outward hostility for his embrace of Democrats?
Well, look, I think when it comes to Jason Isbell, as it's the case with many of these artists, the music helps. And in his case, being a songwriter here in Nashville, something that people respect. It's a Thursday night. People are out on the town. Everybody's got live music, and suddenly there are fireworks. People love the music. They'll take the politics with the music, and he's aware of that. And so he's using his platform to get his sort of message out there, Ali.
I appreciate the fireworks for effect, Cal. Thanks for bringing it all out for us tonight.
It's good timing, right?
On
you like that?
And I appreciate you dressing
totally
up for primetime TV here on MSNBC. It's always good to see you, my friend.
Wow, that hurts across time zones. Thank you, sir.
I love Cal Perry, and he knows that. Cal Perry, my friend, in Tennessee for us tonight. Tonight's Last Word is next.
A recent study from Northwestern University has found new evidence that animals may be able to judge time. Like this dog that just realized Trump still has 2 more years.
And that is tonight's Last Word. I'm Ali Velshi.
The people in the room, they gasped. It then became clear what this was about.
And the fact of the matter was, he was a crook.
This is a story that is not well known.
What stuck in my mind about it, all of our minds, was this was in the White House.
But it really should be, especially maybe now.
That's really, to use a legal expression, that's when the shit hit the fan.
Oh my God. We're on tenterhooks, right?
It's absolutely unprecedented. At least it was then.
Rachel Maddow and MSNBC present Bagman. Subscribe now. First 2 episodes available Tuesday, October 30th.